The lights in the great meeting hall dimmed as Ambassador Lisa Carter took her seat among the alien delegates. The Galactic Council station hung in space like a massive silver wheel, spinning slowly around the red glow of Proxima Centauri. Through the transparent walls, she could see dozens of strange ships from across the galaxy. Each one belonged to a species more advanced than humanity. Lisa felt small in her human-made chair. Around her sat beings that had mastered space travel when Earth was still covered in ice. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals, their bodies reflecting the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns. The Thrix resembled giant insects with compound eyes that never seemed to blink. Above them floated the Nebulans, gaseous clouds of purple and gold that spoke through electromagnetic pulses. The emergency session had been called 3 days ago. Now Lisa understood why. At the center of the hall stood Admiral Zakros of the Hegemony Fleet, his forearms gesturing at a holographic display. The image showed star systems going dark one by one like candles being blown out in a strong wind. "The Devourers have returned," Admiral Zakros announced, his translator converting his alien words into dozens of languages. 17 star systems have fallen in the past month. Over 40 billion souls consumed. Lisa's blood ran cold. She had heard whispers about the Devourers in the diplomatic channels, but always in the past tense. Ancient stories of machine ships that ate entire worlds. She had thought they were legends. "The pattern is always the same," continued the Admiral. "They arrive without warning. Their ships adapt to any weapon we use against them. Nothing survives. Not cities, not forests, not even bacteria. They consume everything and move on." "A Thrix." Delegate clicked its mandibles nervously. "How long before they reach the core worlds?" "At their current rate of expansion, 6 months. Maybe less." The Admiral's 4 eyes scanned the assembled delegates. "We must begin immediate evacuation of the outer colonies. Every ship, every transport, every escape pod. We cannot fight them, so we must run." Lisa raised her hand, feeling foolish among these ancient beings. What about the Outer Rim species? The newer members of the Council? Admiral Zakros looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Ambassador Carter, I understand your concern. But we must focus on saving the populations we can. The mathematics are clear. We cannot save everyone." The Zephyrian delegate, Vextol, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "The human question is valid. What of Earth and the other rim worlds?" "Earth lies directly in the Devourer's projected path," the Admiral replied, "along with 47 other systems. The evacuation. Ships cannot reach them in time. We must make difficult choices." Lisa felt her heart sink. Earth, 8 billion people. Her home, her family, all written off as a mathematical impossibility. "How many ships would it take?" she asked. "To evacuate Earth completely? Assuming we could somehow organize 8 billion people for transport, which we cannot, it would require over 10,000 vessels. The entire Council fleet has only 1,200 ships." The debate continued for hours. Species after species spoke of strategic withdrawals and acceptable losses. The Nebulans suggested hiding their populations in stellar nurseries. The Thrix wanted to retreat to the galactic rim and wait for the Devourers to pass. Everyone had a plan that involved abandoning someone else? Lisa listened to it all with growing horror. These beings, these advanced civilizations, were discussing the death of entire worlds as if they were discussing the weather. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quiet but clear. "Has anyone ever tried to fight them?" The hall fell silent. Admiral Zakros stared at her with all 4 eyes. "Ambassador Carter, I believe you misunderstand. The Devourers are not an enemy you fight. They are a force of nature, a cosmic storm. You do not fight a black hole, you avoid it." "But surely someone must have tried. Many have tried. The Hegemony lost 3 full battle fleets in the last incursion, 200 years ago. The Zephyrian Empire threw everything they had at a single Devourer ship. It adapted to their weapons in minutes and destroyed them all. The Thrix created a virus designed to infect their computer systems. The Devourers turned it into a weapon and used it against them. Lisa felt sick. So we just run? We survive, Admiral Zakros said firmly. That is all we can do. The meeting ended with evacuation orders and timetables. The core worlds would be stripped of their populations and moved to fortress systems in the galactic center. The outer colonies would be abandoned. Earth and 46 other worlds would be left to face the Devourers alone. As the delegates filed out, Lisa remained in her seat, staring at the holographic display. The red dots marking Devourer fleets were moving steadily toward the outer rim. Toward Earth. Far away, in the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Jack Morrison stood on the observation deck of Atlas Station. The orbital defense platform was humanity's most advanced military installation, armed with antimatter cannons and protected by energy shields. It was also hopelessly outmatched by what was coming. Jack was a career soldier, 43 years old, with gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had fought in the Martian Independence War and the asteroid belt conflicts. He had seen good people die in bad situations, but nothing had prepared him for this. Captain, Lieutenant Danny Webb approached from behind, carrying a datapad. We've got the latest deep space sensor readings. Jack took the pad and studied the numbers. 17 star systems, 40 billion dead. The Devourers were moving faster than anyone had predicted. How long until they reach us? 72 hours, sir, maybe less. Jack nodded slowly. Around them, the Atlas Station crew went about their duties. Chief Engineer Roy Martinez was running diagnostics on the antimatter reactors. Communications Officer Katie Phillips was monitoring the long-range arrays. 47 men and women who had volunteered to defend Earth from the unknown. Any word from the Council? Jack asked. Danny's expression darkened. Admiral Brooks received the classified transmission an hour ago. The Council fleets are pulling back to defensive positions 3 sectors away. No reinforcements coming. Jack felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had expected this, but hearing it confirmed was different. They're abandoning us. Yes, sir. Earth's been classified as a loss. Too far out to defend, too many people to evacuate. Jack looked through the observation window at the blue and white marble of Earth spinning slowly below them. City lights twinkled on the night side. 8 billion people living their lives, going to work, falling in love, raising children, all of them unaware that the galaxy's greatest military powers had already written them off. What are your orders, Captain? Danny asked quietly. Jack was quiet for a long moment. In the distance, he could see the running lights of Earth's defensive fleet. 12 destroyers, 4 cruisers, and the aging battleship New York. Admiral Brooks was a good officer, but she had maybe 1,000 ships under her command. The Devourers were coming with tens of thousands. Sir? Danny prompted. Jack turned away from the window. Get me a secure channel to all Earth Defense Force commanders. And patch me through to Admiral Brooks. What are you going to tell them? Jack. Morrison looked at his young lieutenant and smiled grimly. I'm going to tell them that sometimes the best thing you can do is stand up and fight, even when you know you're going to lose. Especially then. In the depths of space, the Devourer fleet continued its advance. Thousands of geometric ships moving in perfect formation, their artificial minds calculating the destruction of worlds. They had consumed civilizations across the galaxy for millions of years. They had adapted to every weapon, countered every strategy, defeated every enemy. They had never faced humanity. The first sign of the Devourers was the silence. One moment, the automated defense satellites around Jupiter were sending their regular signals. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space where they had been. Jack Morrison watched the tactical display from Atlas Station's command center. The sensors showed thousands of geometric shapes emerging from hyperspace like a swarm of metal insects. Each Devourer ship was a perfect killing machine, its hull shifting and changing as it moved. They spread across the outer solar system in formations that hurt to look at, too precise and mathematical for human eyes. My God, whispered Katie Phillips from her communications station. There are so many of them. The numbers kept climbing on the display. 1,000 ships, 2,000, 5,000? The Devourer fleet was larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each ship was the size of a human cruiser, but their energy readings were off the charts. Jupiter's defense grid is gone, reported Lieutenant Danny Webb. Complete destruction in 14 minutes. The satellites didn't even have time to send distress signals. Jack felt his stomach tighten. Jupiter's defense grid had been built to stop asteroid impacts and pirates. It had lasted less than 15 minutes against the Devourers on the main screen. Admiral Helen Brooks appeared from the bridge of the battleship New York. Her weathered face was grim as she studied the sensor readings. Behind her, Jack could see the Earth Defense Fleet forming up in battle formation. 16 ships against 5,000. Captain Morrison, Admiral Brooks said, I'm ordering the fleet to engage the enemy advance guard near Mars. We need to buy time for the orbital platforms to prepare. Jack nodded, though he knew it was hopeless. The Earth Defense Fleet was brave but hopelessly outmatched. Their plasma cannons and nuclear missiles were designed to fight human enemies, not machines that could adapt to any weapon. The battle began. 30 minutes later, Commander Pete Sullivan led 6 destroyers in a direct charge against the Devourer vanguard. The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Plasma beams and missile trails lit up the darkness around Mars like deadly fireworks. For a moment, it looked like they might have a chance. The Devourer ships seemed to take damage from the first wave of attacks. Several of them showed hull breaches and energy fluctuations, but then something changed. The enemy ships are adapting, Danny reported, his voice tight with fear. Their armor is shifting. Our weapons are becoming less effective with each hit. Jack watched in horror as the Devourer ships began to counter every human weapon. The plasma beams that had caused damage minutes before now splashed harmlessly off their hulls. The nuclear missiles detonated without effect. Within an hour, the Devourers had developed complete immunity to everything in Earth's arsenal. Commander Sullivan's destroyer Phoenix was the first to fall. A Devourer ship fired a beam of coherent energy that cut through the Phoenix's armor like paper. The ship broke apart in a flash of light and debris. One by one, the other destroyers followed. The Devourers moved with mechanical precision, their weapons firing in perfect synchronization. They showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. They were machines built for one purpose: to consume and destroy. Fall back, Admiral Brooks ordered over the communication channels. All ships, fall back to the asteroid belt. The surviving human ships retreated, but the Devourers did not pursue. They had learned what they needed to know about human weapons. Now they simply waited while more of their fleet poured out of hyperspace. Back on Atlas Station, Chief Engineer Roy Martinez worked frantically to modify their defense systems. The station's antimatter cannons were the most powerful weapons in human space, designed to break apart asteroids for mining operations. But if plasma and nuclear weapons could not hurt the Devourers, what chance did they have? Captain, Katie Phillips called from her station. I'm receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council observers. They're requesting permission to withdraw to minimum safe distance. Jack felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat. Even the Council observers who had come to watch humanity's last stand were running away. Tell them permission granted. No point in them dying with us. But as Katie worked at her console, Danny Webb made a discovery that changed everything. The young lieutenant had been monitoring the Devourer communication signals, trying to find some weakness in their coordination. What he found was something unexpected. Captain, you need to see this, Danny said, his voice excited. The Devourer's adaptation algorithms, they're based on pattern recognition. They study our tactics, find the mathematical models, and develop counters. So? Jack asked. So they expect us to behave logically. Their whole system is built on the assumption that their enemies will fight in predictable ways. Jack stared at the data on Danny's screen. The Devourer's artificial intelligence was incredibly advanced, but it was still a machine. It thought in terms of mathematical probabilities and logical outcomes. It could adapt to any rational strategy. What are you suggesting, Lieutenant? Danny grinned. I'm suggesting we stop being rational. The idea was insane. Every principle of military tactics said that random behavior was suicide. Discipline, coordination, and predictable patterns were what kept soldiers alive in battle. But the Devourers had already proven that CONVNTIO tactics were useless against them. Jack made the hardest decision of his military career. He ordered all Earth Defense Force units to withdraw beyond the asteroid belt, leaving Earth apparently defenseless. The Galactic Council observers interpreted this as humanity's inevitable surrender. Ambassador Lisa Carter received messages of condolence from 17 different species, each one praising humanity's brief but brave resistance. But Jack Morrison was not surrendering. He was preparing for the most desperate gamble in human history. As the Devourer fleet moved toward Earth, their artificial minds calculated the probable human responses. They expected desperate counterattacks, last-ditch defensive stands, or perhaps attempted evacuations. Their computers ran through millions of scenarios, preparing countermeasures for every logical possibility. They did not expect what happened next. Atlas Station powered up its antimatter cannons and began broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple and direct, transmitted in every language known to the galaxy. This is Captain Jack Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. You want Earth? Come and take it. The broadcast reached every corner of the solar system. The retreating Earth Defense Fleet heard it. The Galactic Council observers heard it. Even the Devourer ships received the transmission, their artificial minds analyzing the words for tactical significance. To the Devourers, it seemed like a standard military challenge. Their computers calculated that Atlas Station posed minimal threat. A single Dreadnought-class ship should be sufficient to eliminate the human position. The construct designated Hunter Prime detached from the main fleet and accelerated toward the station, but Jack Morrison had something the Devourers had never encountered before. He had 20 years of military experience, a crew that trusted him completely, and the desperate creativity that only humans possessed when their backs were against the wall. Roy, I need you to prepare the station for full combat maneuvering, Jack ordered. Forget the safety protocols. I want every system pushed beyond its limits. Captain, if we do that, we'll tear the station apart, Roy protested. Maybe, but if we don't, we'll die anyway. Katie, I want you to start playing music over all communication channels. Something loud and chaotic. Music, sir? The Devourers analyze everything for tactical patterns. Let's give them something to think about. As Hunter Prime approached, Jack began implementing his impossible strategy. Instead of following standard military doctrine, he decided to do everything wrong. Random course changes, nonsensical weapon firing patterns, and maneuvers that violated every principle of space. Combat. The galaxy held its breath as one human captain prepared to dance with death in the darkness between worlds. The Devourers were about to learn something they had never encountered in millions of years of conquest. They were about to discover what happened when logic met madness. When perfect machines faced imperfect humans who refused to quit, the battle for Earth was about to begin. Hunter Prime moved through space like a black sword cutting through the darkness. The Devourer ship was a kilometer long, its hull covered in armor that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. Red lights pulsed along its surface as weapon systems charged to full power. Jack Morrison watched the enemy ship approach on his tactical display. The numbers were not encouraging. Hunter Prime carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Its shields could deflect any known weapon. Its artificial intelligence had the combined knowledge of 1,000 conquered civilizations against this monster. Jack had Atlas Station, a converted asteroid mining platform with a crew of 47 humans who had volunteered to die for their homeworld. Range to target, 200,000 kilometers in closing, reported Danny Webb from his tactical station. Enemy weapons are powering up. Katie, start the music, Jack ordered. Katie Phillips looked confused but obeyed. The speakers throughout Atlas Station came alive with the sound of jazz music, wild, improvised, and completely unpredictable. The same music began broadcasting on all communication frequencies. Roy, give me full power to the engines. Forget the safety margins. Chief Engineer Roy Martinez's hands flew over his controls. Captain, if I push the antimatter reactors past their limits, we could blow ourselves up. Better than letting them blow us up, Jack replied. Do it. The first shots came from maximum range. Hunter Prime fired a coherent plasma beam that could have cut through the hull of any Council warship, but Jack was not flying like a Council captain. Instead of trying to dodge the beam, he accelerated directly toward it at an angle that made no tactical sense. The Devourer ship's computer systems analyzed the maneuver. According to their calculations, Jack was either insane or attempting some kind of suicide attack. They adjusted their aim and fired again. This time Jack did something even stranger. He fired Atlas Station's attitude thrusters in a random pattern while playing the jazz music at full volume. The station spun and tumbled through space like a broken toy, but somehow avoided the enemy fire. What are you doing? Danny asked, gripping his console as the station spun wildly. I'm confusing them, Jack replied, his hands dancing over the flight controls. The Devourers expect us to behave logically, so we're going to do the opposite. Hunter Prime's artificial intelligence struggled to process what it was seeing. The human ship was moving in patterns that made no mathematical sense. It fired weapons at empty space, used engines for steering instead of propulsion, and broadcast meaningless sound patterns that interfered with sensor readings for the first time. In its existence, the Devourer ship encountered something it could not predict. The battle became a deadly dance. Hunter Prime would fire at where Atlas Station should be, but Jack would already be somewhere else, having changed course for no logical reason. The enemy ship tried to adapt, calculating new probability patterns, but Jack kept changing the rules. Fire. Antimatter charges at that asteroid, Jack ordered, pointing at empty space where no asteroid existed. Sir, there's nothing there, Roy protested. Fire anyway. Then use the explosion to change our heading. The antimatter charges detonated in empty space, creating a brief star that blinded Hunter Prime's sensors. In the confusion, Jack spun Atlas, stationed around and fired all weapons at the enemy ship's flank. The attack caught Hunter Prime completely off guard. The Devourer ship's shields flared as antimatter beams struck its hull. For a moment, the enemy ship showed signs of damage, but then the adaptation began. Hunter Prime's armor shifted and changed, becoming resistant to antimatter weapons. Its computer systems analyzed the attack pattern and developed countermeasures. Within minutes, the same weapons that had damaged it before were useless. They're adapting again, Danny reported. Our weapons are losing effectiveness. Jack smiled grimly. Then we'll just have to use different weapons. He ordered Roy to vent plasma from the station's engines while spinning in a corkscrew pattern. The superheated gas formed a glowing trail behind Atlas Station. Hunter Prime sensors tried to analyze the tactical purpose of the maneuver but found none. While the enemy ship was distracted by the plasma trail, Jack fired the station's emergency escape pods in all directions. Each pod had been programmed with a different flight pattern, some spiraling, some zigzagging, some flying in perfect circles. To Hunter Prime's logical mind, it looked like the humans were abandoning ship. The Devourer ship moved to intercept the escape pods, expecting them to contain human survivors. Instead, each pod detonated in a small antimatter explosion, creating a field of chaotic energy that disrupted the enemy's sensors. Now! Jack shouted, and fired every weapon Atlas Station had directly at Hunter Prime's main engine. The attack struck home. Hunter Prime's engine flared and died, leaving the great ship drifting in space. But the victory was brief. Within moments, backup systems came online and the enemy ship began to move again across the galaxy. The Galactic Council species watched the battle with growing amazement. In the crystal halls of the Zephyrian homeworld, ancient beings that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires found themselves unable to predict what the human would do next. The Thrix military analysts abandoned their careful calculations, their compound eyes unable to process the chaos of human tactics. Even the Nebulans, who could see probability clouds across multiple dimensions, found their sight clouded by the unpredictable nature of human behavior. How is this possible? Asked Vextal, the Zephyrian council member. The human ship should have been destroyed in the first exchange. Their tactics make no sense, replied Admiral Zakros from his command ship. They are fighting like madmen. But Ambassador Lisa Carter, watching from the council station, understood something the others did not. They're not fighting like madmen, she said quietly. They're fighting like humans. Back in the battle, Jack Morrison pushed his ship and crew beyond all limits. Atlas Station's hull groaned under the stress of impossible maneuvers. The antimatter reactors ran at dangerous levels. Life support systems flickered and failed in sections of the station, but somehow, they were still alive. Hunter Prime's artificial intelligence began to show signs of strain. The enemy ship had been designed to adapt to any logical threat, but human behavior was not logical. Every time it thought it understood the pattern, Jack would do something completely different. Katie, start broadcasting random numbers mixed with that jazz music, Jack ordered. Roy, I want you to fire the engines in sequence, first the port thrusters, then the starboard, then the main engines, then shut everything down for 10 seconds. Captain, that will make us a sitting duck, Roy protested. Only if they can predict what we're going to do next. And I don't even know what we're going to do next. The maneuver was insane. Atlas Station suddenly stopped moving in the middle of the battle, hanging motionless in space like a dead ship. Hunter Prime's weapons locked onto the stationary target and prepared to fire. But just as the enemy ship fired its main weapons, Jack did something impossible. He fired Atlas Station's main engines at full power while simultaneously detonating 3 antimatter charges behind them. The combined explosion launched the station forward at tremendous speed, directly toward Hunter Prime. The Devourer ship's computers had calculated for every possible maneuver except a direct ramming attack by a ship that should have been destroyed. Hunter Prime tried to adjust its aim, but it was too late. Atlas Station crashed into the enemy ship's hull with the force of a small asteroid. Both ships spun through space, locked together in a deadly embrace. In the twisted wreckage of the two ships, Jack Morrison pulled himself to his feet. Around him, his crew worked to restore power to their damaged systems. Through the cracked observation window, he could see the rest of the Devourer fleet moving toward Earth. Hunter Prime was defeated, but the battle was far from over. The main fleet had learned from their scout ship's failure. They would not underestimate humanity again, but as Jack watched the approaching enemy fleet, he realized something important. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers had encountered something they could not predict or control. They had faced the beautiful chaos of human nature and found their perfect logic wanting. The galaxy held its breath as 3,000 Devourer ships changed course toward Atlas Station. The real battle was about to begin. The main Devourer fleet descended on Atlas Station like a storm of metal and death. 3,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, carrying weapons that could burn continents and armor that had never been penetrated. Jack Morrison stood in the ruins of his command center, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. The collision with Hunter Prime had damaged Atlas Station badly. Emergency lights flickered overhead, and the smell of burned electronics filled the air. Through the cracked observation window, he could see the approaching fleet blotting out the stars. "Damage report," Jack called out. Chief Engineer Roy Martinez looked up from a sparking control panel. "Main engines are offline. We've lost power to sections 4 through 7. Life support is failing in the lower decks. And the antimatter reactors are running at 140% capacity. How long before they explode? At this rate? Maybe 2 hours? Maybe less?" Jack nodded grimly. 2 hours to face 3,000 enemy ships with a crippled station and a crew of 47 humans. The odds were so bad they were almost funny. "Katie, can you still reach the Earth Defense Fleet?" Communications Officer Katie Phillips worked frantically at her damaged console. "I'm getting through on emergency frequencies. Admiral Brooks is standing by." The face of Admiral Helen Brooks appeared on the main screen, distorted by static. Behind her, the bridge of the battleship New York showed signs of battle damage. Jack, what's your status? Still breathing, Admiral. Hunter Prime is down, but the main fleet is almost on top of us. We're moving to support you, but we're still 6 hours out. Can you hold them that long? Jack looked at his damaged station and battered crew. Katie Phillips had a bandage wrapped around her left arm. Danny Webb was working with only one functioning tactical display. Roy Martinez was covered in grease and burn marks from trying to keep the engines running. We'll give it our best shot, Jack replied. The first wave of attacks came like a wall of fire. Hundreds of energy beams converged on Atlas Station's position, each one powerful enough to vaporize a city block. The station's shields flared and failed within seconds, but Jack had learned something from his fight with Hunter Prime. He did not try to block the attacks or run away. Instead, he did something no rational captain would attempt. He flew directly into the enemy formation, Atlas. Station plunged through the Devourer fleet like a wounded bird diving through a flock of predators. Enemy ships fired at point-blank range, but Jack's erratic flight path made him nearly impossible to hit. He spun the station end over end while firing weapons in random directions. "This is insane," Danny shouted over the noise of alarms and explosions. "I know," Jack replied, pulling the station into a barrel roll that should have torn it apart. "That's the point." The Devourer fleet tried to adapt to Jack's chaotic tactics, but their computers could not process what they were seeing. Atlas. Station bounced off the hull of one enemy ship, used another as a shield, and somehow managed to fire its weapons while spinning like a top. The enemy fleet began to show signs of confusion. Some ships fired on each other by mistake when their targeting systems became overloaded by contradictory data. Others simply stopped moving. Their artificial minds locked in endless loops trying to calculate the probability of impossible maneuvers, but there were still too many of them. For every Devourer ship that Jack confused or damaged, 10 more took its place. The station's hull cracked under the strain of the overloaded engines. Atmosphere leaked from breached sections. "Hull breach on deck 5, Roy reported. "We're losing." "Air fast. Seal it off," Jack ordered, then had another insane idea. "Actually, don't seal it. Use the escaping air as a thruster." "Sir?" "Vent the atmosphere from the damaged sections. Use it to change our direction when the main engines fail." It was a desperate measure that wasted their precious life support, but it worked. Atlas Station used jets of escaping air to dodge enemy fire, creating an unpredictable flight pattern that no computer could calculate. Meanwhile, the Earth Defense Fleet had received Jack's transmission and was following his example. Admiral Brooks ordered all ships to abandon standard military doctrine and fight with pure human instinct. The cruiser Denver fired its engines while spinning end over end, creating a corkscrew attack pattern that confused the enemy sensors. The destroyer Boston launched all of its escape pods at once, each one programmed with a different random flight path. Commander Pete Sullivan, now commanding the damaged destroyer Atlanta, tried a maneuver that should have been suicide. He fired his ship's main engines while the ship was pointed backwards, flying stern first into battle while playing classical music over all communication frequencies. The human fleet's chaotic attacks began to have an effect on the Devourer formation. The enemy ships, designed to counter logical military tactics, found themselves unable to adapt to the creative chaos of human warfare. Some Devourer ships began firing randomly when their targeting computers overloaded. Others collided with each other when their navigation systems failed to predict human behavior. The perfect formation began to break apart as confusion spread through their ranks across the galaxy. The Council species watched in stunned silence. In the floating cities of the Nebulans, gaseous beings pulsed with colors that had no names, trying to express thoughts beyond their language. The Thrix abandoned their hive-mind communication, each individual insect attempting to understand human behavior on its own. Even the ancient Zephyrians found themselves at a loss. "How do they fight without strategy?" Vextel asked. "How do they win without logic?" "They don't win through logic," Ambassador Lisa Carter replied from her position at the Council station. "They win through will, through the refusal to accept defeat, through the stubborn human belief that impossible just means it hasn't been done yet." Back in the battle, Atlas Station was falling apart. The overloaded antimatter reactors were approaching critical levels. The hull was cracked in dozens of places. Half the weapons were offline and the life support systems were failing, but Jack Morrison was not finished yet. "Roy, I want you to prepare to overload the reactors," he ordered. "Captain, if we do that, we'll create an antimatter explosion that will destroy everything within 100,000 kilometers. Including us, I know. But first, I want you to route all remaining power to the communication array. Danny, prepare to transmit on all frequencies." "What message, sir?" Jack looked around at his crew. These 47 humans had followed him into an impossible battle against overwhelming odds. They had fought with courage and creativity that amazed the galaxy. Now they were about to make the ultimate sacrifice. "Send this message to every human ship in the system," Jack said. "Tell them to remember who we are. Tell them that humans don't surrender. We don't retreat. And we don't give up no matter what the odds." He paused, watching Earth through the cracked observation window. The blue and white planet seemed so small and fragile against the darkness of space. Tell them that when Jack Morrison stood alone against the invasion, he wasn't really alone. He had 8 billion humans behind him, and every one of them was worth fighting for. As the message went out across the solar system, the antimatter reactors reached critical mass. The Devourer fleet, sensing the approaching explosion, began to move into defensive positions, but Jack Morrison had one last surprise waiting for them. One final act of human unpredictability that would change the course of the battle and shock the galaxy into silence. The price of standing alone was about to be paid in full. The antimatter reactors of Atlas Station reached critical mass, filling the damaged corridors with a dangerous blue glow. Jack Morrison stood at his command post, his hand hovering over the emergency release that would turn his station into a star-bright explosion. Around him, his crew worked with desperate calm, knowing they had only minutes left. "Reactor output at 160% and climbing," Roy Martinez reported, sweat beading on his forehead. "We're past the point of no return, Captain." Jack nodded, watching the Devourer fleet through the cracked observation window. 3,000 enemy ships had formed a defensive sphere around Atlas Station, their hulls gleaming like black mirrors in the reactor's glow. Their artificial minds had calculated the coming explosion and positioned themselves to minimize damage. It was exactly what Jack had hoped they would do. "Danny, are you ready with the antimatter stream controls?" Jack asked. Lieutenant Danny Webb looked confused. "Sir, I thought we were going to detonate the reactors. Change of plans. Instead of an explosion, we're going to vent the antimatter in a controlled stream. Roy, can you direct the flow toward that cluster of ships at bearing 27 Mark V? Roy's eyes widened as he understood. "Captain, that's not an explosion. That's a weapon. A completely unpredictable weapon. Exactly. The Devourers expect us to blow ourselves up in a final desperate act. They're not expecting us to turn our dying station into the galaxy's biggest flamethrower." The Devourer collective intelligence made its first critical error. Analyzing the overloading reactors, their logical minds concluded that humanity was preparing for a suicide attack. They moved their ships into a formation designed to survive the blast, clustering together for maximum shield overlap. It was perfect positioning for what Jack had planned. "Execute," Jack ordered. Instead of detonating in a massive explosion, the antimatter reactors vented their contents in a brilliant stream of pure energy. The beam lanced out from Atlas Station like a sword of white fire, striking the nearest cluster of Devourer ships. The effect was not destruction but chaos. The antimatter stream created cascading energy reactions that jumped from ship to ship like living lightning. The Devourer's shields, designed to block conventional weapons, could not contain the unpredictable energy patterns, but the real surprise came from the human fleet. Admiral Brooks had understood Jack's message perfectly. As the antimatter stream lit up the darkness, every human ship in the solar system abandoned the last traces of military doctrine. The cruiser Denver fired its engines while spinning like a top, using the rotation to scatter antimatter charges in a spiral pattern. The destroyer Boston launched its remaining missiles while flying backwards, creating a flight path that no computer could predict. Commander Pete Sullivan performed a maneuver that should have been impossible. He fired the Atlanta's main guns, while using the ship's artificial gravity to bend the energy beams in random directions. The result was a cone of destruction that hit enemy ships from angles that defied physics across the galaxy. The Council species watched in amazement as human tactics shattered every principle of warfare. In the crystal spires of the Zephyrian homeworld, ancient beings pulsed with confusion as they tried to understand what they were seeing. "How do they coordinate without communication?" asked Admiral Zakros from his command ship. "How do they achieve victory through chaos?" Ambassador Lisa Carter smiled as she watched the battle unfold on the Council Station's displays. "They don't coordinate through communication. They coordinate through understanding." Every human in that fleet knows what Jack Morrison is thinking because they think the same way. The Devourer fleet began to experience something they had never encountered in millions of years of conquest: systematic failure. Their adaptation algorithms, designed to counter logical opponents, could not process the creative chaos of human nature. Some enemy ships shut down completely, their computers locked in endless loops trying to calculate the probability of impossible maneuvers. Others began attacking randomly, their targeting systems confused by contradictory data. The perfect formation dissolved into confusion as ship after ship fell victim to their own inability to understand human unpredictability. Jack realized that humanity had discovered something the galaxy had never known. Chaos itself could be a weapon. Unpredictability was not a weakness but a strength that no logical mind could counter. "This is humanity," Jack broadcast on all frequencies, his voice reaching every council world. "We don't retreat, we don't surrender, and we don't make sense. Deal with it." The turning point came when a group of Devourer ships tried to adapt to human tactics by fighting randomly themselves. But their artificial minds could only simulate chaos, not truly embrace it. The result was predictable randomness, which was not random at all. The human ships, fighting with genuine chaos born of desperation and creativity, tore through the confused enemy formation like wolves among sheep. Every human captain fought differently, following their own instincts and ideas. There was no grand strategy, no coordinated plan. Just 8 billion years of human evolution unleashed in the darkness of space. The end came not with a dramatic explosion, but with a simple surrender. The remaining Devourer ships, their adaptation algorithms completely overwhelmed, powered down their weapons and began broadcasting the machine equivalent of a white flag. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers had encountered something they could not understand, adapt to, or defeat. They had met the beautiful chaos of human nature and found their perfect logic wanting. Admiral Brooks arrived with the Earth Defense Fleet to find Jack Morrison standing in the ruins of Atlas Station. His uniform was torn, his station was barely holding together, but his eyes were bright with the knowledge that humanity had just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. "Status report, Captain," Admiral Brooks said with a smile. "Mission accomplished, Admiral. Earth is safe. The Devourers have surrendered." "How many casualties?" Jack looked around at his crew. Danny Webb was grinning despite a bandaged head. Katie Phillips was crying with relief. Roy Martinez was already working to stabilize the damaged reactors. 47 crew members, all alive and accounted for. The aftermath was even more remarkable than the battle itself. Ambassador Lisa Carter found herself addressing the Galactic Council not as a representative of a minor species but as the voice of the galaxy's newest military power. The Council species began studying human tactics, trying to understand how chaos could be weaponized. The Zephyrians requested military advisors. The Thrix wanted to recruit human officers for their fleets. Even the proud hegemony admitted they had much to learn from humanity's impossible strategies, but the most important change was in humanity itself. Jack Morrison's stand at Atlas Station proved that being different was not a weakness, but the greatest strength any species could have. The galaxy might never understand how humans thought, But they would never again underestimate what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the edge. 3 months later, Admiral Jack Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new Atlas station, watching Earth's lights twinkle in the darkness. The planet looked the same as always, but everything had changed. Humanity was no longer the newest member of the Galactic Council. They were the species that had done the impossible. Katie Phillips, now promoted to commander, approached with the daily reports. "What are you thinking about, Admiral?" Jack smiled, remembering the moment when he had stood alone against an invasion and discovered that he was never truly alone. Behind him had stood 8 billion humans, each one worth fighting for, each one carrying the spark of creativity and chaos that made humanity unique. "I'm thinking about what impossible thing we'll do next," he said. In the depths of space, the galaxy held its breath and waited to find out.